Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Silo Season 1 Episode 7. It is called The Flamekeepers. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So, obviously I've not been feeling too hot on the show these past few episodes. No pun intended, given the name of the episode. But I came into this with muted expectations. I did see a little bit of buzz that this episode was more exciting than the last few, which I think is technically true. I mean, I'm not going to sit and say it was the best thing ever by any means. I think it was a little bit more leaning towards some of the central mysteries that we actually care about, but I also don't think it's without its faults, and it's not without some of the elements that I'm finding a little tedious and repetitive in the show. I guess I can actually sum up one of the things that's really bugging me about the episodes, basically of the last 4 now, including this one, is that so much of it is red tape. It's all about red tape. It's all the red tape that Juliet keeps encountering in her investigation and trying to do stuff. And I don't think any of the red tape is that interesting. It's all just kind of like, we can have red tape whenever we want more red tape to block her so that she can't get to the answers quicker than we want, kind of thing. Like it kind of feels very arbitrary sometimes and just there to extend the story, and in a way that doesn't feel like it's like creating more mystery by doing it. But anyway, so we left off last time with the cameras, security cameras. And it is, of course, Sims and his janitors who are watching these cameras. And I suppose the one thing that never clicked for me with this last episode that became more clear watching this one is it reminded me that when they found that camera, when Juliet saw this like camcorder, they didn't really know what it was exactly. And I've brought up the question before of like, do they have any type of cameras? And I kind of forgotten about that when they did that reveal last episode. So one of the big things with this episode is that Sims says it out loud at one point. The problem is that she knows that we can do this, that she understands that we can watch them with the cameras. She may not know the word camera necessarily, but she understands what the technology is fundamentally doing now and that they're being watched. And I think the idea that they didn't even suspect that they could be seen with technology was not something I considered. And obviously the reveal at the end of the last episode was that they were being watched, but it never clicked until this episode. Oh yeah, they didn't even understand that was a possibility, and now they have to be wary of it, I guess, as they're doing stuff. And they're following Juliet around all over the place. They're keeping track of her, and almost to the point where it becomes this like she just kind of looks into a blind spot effectively later in the episode, and they start freaking out because they can't see her. I almost wish they did a bit more with that, actually. That sounds kind of fun if she figured out how the cameras work and actually tried to find where the blind spots were and used it against them, and that could have been quite a fun challenge for a character to overcome. Instead, by the time she understands that the cameras are a thing, that's the build up to the cliffhanger at the end of the episode. And maybe she will still do that. There's nothing to say she won't. In fact, like Sims' like little army of thugs is basically after her now. So I don't know if they're going to de-escalate that next episode, and she'll come up with some like kind of temporary protection to stop herself from being taken by the Silo Gestapo, or if it's just going to be a case of she's on the run now and she can't show herself in front of like Sims' men, kind of thing. But that was a big thing we built up to. We brought back the old woman from the first episode who was convinced that like certain people weren't allowed to have kids, and that was really that was fleshed out a little bit this episode, which I went through a sort of range of emotions as that stuff was coming up. The parts of it I didn't like was the name Flamekeepers. Actually, I kind of hated that we like. I don't know if I necessarily hate that there's a name for the people who want to know more about the outside world necessarily, but I think the name itself sounds really cheesy, and it sounds like something from the Hunger Games. Like, it sounds like something from a young adult series, and I didn't like that. It felt a bit weird. There was something that I wasn't liking until they kind of like changed it a little bit. The way Gloria, the older woman, was talking about the Flamekeepers and how they're dying out and they're using drugs to make us forget, so we can't, so we don't know and keep things from the past and so on and so on. She was kind of talking about it as if it was like that's why they were stopping them from having kids, is they didn't want this to be passed down. And I didn't like the implication as she was saying that only people who genetically came from others who were like Flamekeepers could care about finding answers, because it just felt too binary to me, and it kind of made it like a genetic line thing, and I thought that was really dull. However, but before I go any further, they actually fixed this by the end of the scene, where she straight up says to Juliet, no, like, your mother wasn't a Flamekeeper, but she was naturally curious, so effectively became one. And that's the one thing they can't like just read out of is that eventually people will start asking questions. We all have the capacity to be curious, and I think that was important to say. I think it would have been really dull if it was only like a lineage of certain people who would care. Like the idea that that's already decided and it's not something that anyone can start to believe would ruin a lot of the potential for other characters becoming invested in like the core drive of the show. And I think that would be a shame. So they fixed it by the end of the scene. Like, so credit where the credit is due there. Like, they actually didn't have the problem that I thought was kind of starting to come out in that scene. But that was kind of my thought process as it was going on, is that I was starting to feel, oh, I don't know if I feel about this, and then it kind of upswung at the end. But it is interesting to me, we're only just getting to the hard drive now, at the end of episode 7, after, like, it feels like there was so much stuff in those first 2 episodes, 3 to an extent, but especially the first 2, that were still just kind of very slowly unpacking in a lot of ways. So it's, in the one hand, I'm like, I think the stuff that excites me more when I'm watching this, obviously it's the greater questions, and it's the discussions of, is there any clues as to what the world was like? When Juliet's talking to the guy who tries to kiss her this episode, and it's a bit awkward, but she's talking about lights in the sky, she's talking about the stars, and at one point he says he saw one, like a light moving across and then disappearing, and that sparks my mind, because my mind is like, okay, did he see a shooting star, or did he see something else? Did he see something as simple as a plane in the distance? Did he see, whatever it could be, right? Could be a UFO for all we know. But that's the sort of little detail that kind of gets my mind going. But I think in terms of the actual core episode to episode plots that we're getting right now, I can kind of categorize the things I like and the things I don't like fairly clearly. I think you've got the red tape, you've got the investigations of the murders, and you've got the secret janitors who are like covering things up. And I mostly think that's kind of dull and or lame. And then you've got the imagination and the thirst for knowledge of the outside world, and that kind of blossoming in the main character. And honestly, I do think the humanization of Billings to be a more sympathetic character, and to an extent even Tim Robbins' character, the mayor, he's become a little more interesting since he stuck up for our last episode. And then even here, but I don't know, he could just be plainer though and still turn out to be like a villainy villain McVillanson. So it's kind of interesting for me that I'm really, like, I have like such a set, like, it's almost like I've got scales in front of me, and I can actually put in either side the things I like and don't like, and how that adds up this episode. Other things, obviously, is that Juliet gets her father's help to talk to Gloria. It's a whole thing where she's not really supposed to see her, and we get a little bit more here or there, and he effectively admits to stopping or tricking people into thinking their birth control was taken out, but not actually being told what the real reason for it was. He was told things like he was stopping the spread of certain genetic diseases, things like that. But, he maybe had suspicions, but he didn't ask questions because he knows not to ask. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I still don't like him as an actor very much. I remembered what I mainly know him from, and maybe I'm holding a bit of a vendetta, but he's the villain, and I think the last Mila Jovovich Resident Evil movie, and that is like some of the worst trash I have ever watched. and he's not good in that either. And maybe the PTSD of that movie is also, maybe he's carrying that stigma with him. And even though I couldn't remember there was that last time I talked about him, I couldn't remember that, but maybe that's part of it. But yeah, so they have a bit of a confrontation. That may be building up to some more stuff, or maybe he does something good for his daughter when he gets a chance to like stick up for her or something. Maybe arguably a slightly more interesting detail, although it still kind of ties into the whole janitors thing, is the judge seemingly like might not really have any power, and she's just like the face of the system. But she actually is also scared of Sims and the janitors and stuff. Like she, it seemed like she didn't really have any power the way she was talking to Juliet this episode. She mentioned being scared of them, or although she said she was scared, but she meant like they'll stop you. She kind of spoke as if she was also one of the people who was just being kept in line. So that's fine. I still feel to some extent that we got rid of too many of the interesting characters early on, and I'm still feeling that absence. I think Billings, to an extent, has sort of been molded and fleshed out enough to feel like a proper replacement for one of them, certainly, but I'm still feeling a bit of a void of like a proper supporting cast that I care about. And I don't know if there's much we can really do with that or about that yet, but I mean, I do think this was a better episode because it was at least poking at some of the more interesting questions, and we're getting a bit closer to actually having Juliet maybe see what's on that hard drive, of maybe seeing these other things. I guess I think I would have felt much better about this episode if this had been like episode 4 and we were kind of getting to some, it's funny because I feel like this show, all it's really been doing is withholding things from us. And it's kind of the same thing I was saying about the red tape, and the red tape putting things on pause while she has to deal with the red tape. And then when she can finally get through the red tape at the end of the episode, we get her tease for the next thing, right? It's kind of the formula of the show at this point. On a larger sense, I feel the same way about all the, I guess, the MacGuffins and all the little details that it's focusing on, like the hard drive, like a lot of the stuff, the investigation about Georgie's death. It's kind of this dangling carrot almost of like in the distance, and that would be fine. Like there's nothing wrong with something like being introduced and then like sort of leaving for a bit, and then but we have to be doing something else that's different in the meantime, that's engaging in its own right. But she technically has been looking for this hard drive the whole time. She's not been doing other things that are more interesting that have kept us caught up in the moment. And then it's like, oh, she stumbled into it now. She's kind of been looking for this exact thing and has finally gotten to it here. And I wouldn't say that the moment itself is super exciting, because it just feels like we should have been here already. And again, that's mainly a symptom because I don't think that these things we were doing in the meantime were all that exciting, because it's just getting through the red tape. That the episode presents us with new red tape. She has to fight her way through the red tape. Then we can get our exciting bit at the end that hopefully hooks us in for the next episode. So I'm still lukewarm on the show. I would be very surprised if it can really turn my opinion around now by the end of the season. If anything, I think the sad part would be if it is just really good, maybe for the last 2 episodes, because it would really fall into that Netflix like show pattern of big opening, big closing, lots of time killing in the middle of the show. And I don't think it would, at this point now, we've had what I would say are 4 episodes of the dull middle of the series. And I think that even if the last couple episodes, like 8, 9, 8, 9, 10, or even just 9 and 10, I don't think it would necessarily make me look back at the season and go, oh, well, that makes it a good season overall then. I will always feel like it had this big sagging problem in the middle that was, at times a little bit of a chore to get through. And I can't really shake that feeling all that much. The other thing this episode that I kind of glossed over is that there's a bit of a riot on one of the floors early on, and Juliet was off trying to get information about Gloria. So Billings ended up dealing with it himself and got elbowed in the face. It's basically to show that the station is on the brink of everyone snapping, because things are not very stable in the wake of everything that's been going on and having the new sheriff. People don't necessarily have faith in her yet, so tensions are running high, all these things. And that's all fine. It's all fine. I don't have too much more to add. I think, I people didn't want me to stop before the end of the season. People wanted me to finish it out, and I'll do my best to keep doing it. You might get the episodes a little bit late. I'll fit it in when it's convenient, and give other shows priority. But I think that's all I've got for this episode, really. So yeah. So that's my thoughts on the Flamekeepers, episode 7 of Silo. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. And of course, if you want to support all the content, you can do that over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv and help keep all the content coming. But that's me, so thank you once again. I'll see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?